Hey everybody, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, happy whatever you're celebrating. Happy school off for the kids. It is the Pick Six podcast on a December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas. I'm here with the whole crew. So we've got four of us today. It's not quite a round table, but maybe like a square table where we'll talk about the end of the Nebraska football season, the Husker basketball loss to Wisconsin and what's coming up. And then just some big picture questions, not only about the college football playoff, but anything else that anybody wants to talk about, whether it's NIL or, players coming and going, leaving, whatever. But Evan Bland is with us, Dirk Chatelain's with us, and Tom Shatel is with us. Because we're close to a day in which we get presents. Most of us get presents. I think all of us do. I thought I would open with this before I thank our sponsor. What was the best Christmas gift you ever got as a kid?
I can start. I'm from the younger generation, and I grew up with the Nintendo 64. And so when I got GoldenEye for Christmas one year, the old first-person James Bond shooter, I wore the heck out of that thing for a long time. It was a good social outlet for kids in the neighborhood to come over and play. I think it was like $70 back in 1997. So
It probably was.
That was a lot of money back then, especially. Kind of a reminder that my parents actually did love me and listen to my Christmas list. And, led to many an hour, many a school sick day fulfilled playing that thing. So that was probably mine.
All right. Mine was, if I'm really honest, it was probably a Western set that I didn't expect I would be getting. With it was just like a ranch or like a small town mercantile setting where there's horses and little cowboys and things like that. And I was about 6, and I think I played plays per capita. I'm big on that. I probably had a higher play per capita on that Western set than anything else in my whole life. But I would say that the actual probably best gift that I ever got was just a football, right? Like I got a Franklin O.J. Simpson football.
Wow.
O.J. Simpson on it back before the juice had committed any crimes. And, I played with that thing all the time for however many years. I had it for a long time, and then it was lost to the ether at some point. But yeah, it would be that O.J. Simpson football, the juice.
Tom, you go. I'm still thinking.
Yeah, thanks. Well, mine's easy. It was now this was not a Nintendo. This was 1968. This was a electric football game. My parents used to hide something every year, and we'd have to open up a present, and then we'd have to have a little, a scavenger hunt or treasure hunt to try to find it. And it was behind the couch, and this is this giant thing wrapped up. I hurriedly opened it up, like the kid in what's the movie with the kid with the BB gun?
Christmas Story.
Yes, I opened it up like that, and there it was, the electric football, which was the thing to have back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
This giant board that was it was metal, and you plugged it in, and it shook and vibrated, and you put the players on the field and they moved. You gave them the ball. You actually set up the play like you were Sean Watson, and you gave them the ball, and you set up the defense to try to stop them, and you didn't know where they were going to go. So it was kind of like Sean Watson. And I remember the two teams I got were the Chicago Bears and the St. Louis Cardinals. And you could mail away for you couldn't go to the store, you couldn't go to Target, and you had to mail away for other teams. And I eventually got the Chargers and the Packers, I think. But what a great gift! I was playing offensive coordinator for weeks.
So Tom, let me jump in on that because that is really funny you mentioned that. We played with that all the time as kids. We did not even bother plugging it in, though. We just moved the. It got so ridiculous after a while because they wouldn't go where you wanted them to go anyway. So we didn't even bother plugging it in. We just set them up and ran our own plays, and we played with that. I mean, probably hundreds of hours. But the postscript to that story is a couple days ago we were doing some last minute Christmas shopping, and we were in Shields out at Village Point, and they have that exact electronic football game. And I picked it up. I was going to get it as a gag gift for my parents because they watched us play that all the time. And it was like $70. And we got it to the line, and my wife basically looked at me, that look that your wife gives you when she says, "Are you seriously going to spend $70 on a gag gift that is going to sit in a closet somewhere?"
I know that look.
And so I left it at the register, and it sort of broke my heart. But, man, I have such fond memories of that exact same game.
That's funny.
I wish I'd have been the cashier that saw you leave that at the register.
Oh.
What the F am I going to do with this? Why did you pick this up if you were going to? What's your present, Dirk?
What part of the store was that in, by the way? I'm asking for a friend.
Yeah, it's at Shields. You'll find it at Shields. There were about 5,000 people in Shields when I was there. So I recommend wearing about 6 masks if you're going to go in there. But my gift, we got a lot of Nintendo, Sega type stuff. We got a ping pong table one year that we got a lot of use out of. We got an air hockey table one year that we got a lot of use out of. So it was always, it always revolved around sports. There was basically nothing else in our house. So
I'm a big air hockey man. I love that game. All right. I want to thank our sponsor today. Our sponsor, as always, is the Schwalbach Agency. Team Schwalbach is a family-owned all-state insurance agency with 4 licensed insurance pros, saving thousands of Nebraska Husker fans money. They sell homeowner, auto, life, and flood insurance across Nebraska, and they also insure all the big boy toys. Motorcycles, boats, RVs, and off-road vehicles. If you've had your roof replaced in the last 5 years, give Daryl Schwalbach, Kyle Schwalbach, Nancy Mostek, or Kyle Murdoch a call at 402-590-5200. They will help you save a bundle. Free no-obligation insurance reviews and quotes, and you can reach them again at 402-590-5200 or www.nebraskaallstate.com. That's www.nebraskaallstate.com. Thank you to Team Schwalbach, the Schwalbach Agency. Well, there were 4 people from the Nebraska media who covered the game in Piscataway, New Jersey. I want to set the scene briefly here. I think there was probably 3 people from Rutgers. The press box, the door to the press box was left open. And so it was about 47 degrees for most of the game. Great sight lines, but frigid up there. Everybody wearing their coats or their vests. And for about 2.5 quarters, that's about as mistake prone and screwed up of an offense and a special teams as you're ever going to see. And Nebraska really looked like they were going to put that one in the earth, and it would have been the worst loss of the year, given the fact that Rutgers, so many players were hurt, and you could tell they were ready to go, and they really didn't. They probably shouldn't have played the game. Honestly, they were beat up, but it looked like it was going to be a bad loss if they weren't going to be able to pull that out because Aaron Cruikshank got the ball kicked to him. But Nebraska recovered late. They win that game. They racked up 620 yards. I think they ran for 356. They were able to put sort of a nice bow on the season. And then the next day, they voted not to play in a bowl. And I kind of thought that may be the case. I kind of thought that the best thought for Frost would have been to end it himself on Friday night and say, "Good job, guys, let's go home." But he didn't. He kind of let them have a vote, and they decided against it. And so I'm just curious what people's thoughts were watching that game on the telly and the decision about not to take a bowl game, which we don't know exactly what bowl game it would have been, but it would not have been the December 30th games, and it would not have been the Guaranteed Rate Bowl because there was no one for Nebraska to play in it. There was no pair. There was no Big 12 team that was willing to do it.
There was no guaranteed rate?
No guaranteed rate. Non-guaranteed. Adjustable.
I thought Tom hit the nail on the head in saying that was really, a microcosm of the whole season. I thought that, I tend to look at the glass, half empty. That's sort of my thing. And I do want to acknowledge that, Nebraska deserves a lot of credit for coming back, but I think it would be a mistake to, either as a fan base or a coaching staff or as a media, to take too much of that game and say, this means everything's trending in the right direction for 2021. Because I thought the first, 2.5 quarters of that game were an abomination.
They were rough.
And I think Nebraska, in many ways, it's the perfect way to go out because it does give you, I think, a boost going into the winter that you might not have gotten with a bowl game. You might have played poorly in a bowl game, and it made it very hard for those guys to get out of bed on January 27th to go lift weights. I think in this case, you give guys a little bit of a boost, you give fans a little bit of a boost, but I don't think that it should change anybody's perception about where the program is or how many things need to change for them to actually contend next year.
What do you think, Tom?
Yeah, I had no problem with them turning down a bowl. I was kind of curious how the vote went. Correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it seemed like it was sort of split. There were some people who wanted to play and some who didn't, and it struck me as being so 2020. And also the reaction. I put out a thing on my Twitter feed saying I had no problem with them not playing. They've already proven everything that they needed to prove. This, as far as toughness and wanting to play, yes, they fought to play, but they played 8 games. If they played every game that they were able to play, and I just had no problem if they wanted to go home and see their families. God, more power to them. The reaction was like half angry and really and sort of, how dare you? This is not Nebraska football. This is not. The culture needs to be fixed. It's still broken, and half of it was sort of it showed empathy, which I wanted to. That these guys need a break. That was so 2020, wasn't it? In the pandemic, you're either macho and you don't believe in the pandemic, or else you're going the other way, and everybody needs to stay home. So it's. I just thought, what, I've got 3 girls, 1 in college, 2 basically high school age, and I've seen what they went through this year, and it was not good. It's tough. It's tough to be a kid right now. It's tough to be a teenager, and I didn't know that they hadn't seen their families since April or March. I'm going, holy cow! If I had seen my daughters since April or March, I'd be going crazy. I'd be yelling about a bowl game. So,
right.
Especially the Birmingham Bowl played Boise, who didn't have a coach, by the way, and that's
COVID anyway.
That's a bizarre hire, or they would have played Army in the Independence Bowl. Those games wouldn't have proven anything. They just wouldn't have. So there was nothing really that they were going to prove. I think this program has a lot of internal work to do this off season. So let's just get with it and figure out how you're going to play next year. I said before the season that this year was all about getting some kind of momentum for next year. It's a big year next year. I don't think they gained any momentum at all. Just didn't see it. They did on defense to a degree, but really there wasn't a lot to take away from this season. A bowl game wasn't going to add to that either way. So I was 100% fine with it.
Evan, you thought they should have played, or you indicated you thought they would.
Yeah. When we had our podcast last week, I said I would be surprised if Nebraska turned it down, just given everything that it's gone through. from bringing players back at the end of March and April to, suing the Big Ten, fighting the Big Ten for the postponement and the restart of the season, talking about development. That's been a talking point for a long time, about missing bowl practices and missing spring ball. So it felt like if they were given an opportunity to play another game, that would fall in line with everything that they've talked about. But I think it's been kind of like Tom said, it's been telling when you start breaking down the reasons why they turned it down. You see Cam Taylor-Britt's mom on Twitter saying she hasn't seen her boy or hugged her boy since early March. And you see that these players have played 7 straight weeks against Big Ten opponents and just have been physically ground out. And there's no outlet socially, and they can't go out and mix with the student body or do the sort of things that players would do in a normal year to blow off some steam. So there was definitely some of that mental fatigue. We saw that in the post-game Zoom where multiple players were asked if they would like to play in a bowl, and everyone kind of hedged their bets with the exception of Garrett Nelson about, we'll see how everyone feels. So now, we head into this kind of weird, short off season where people feel good about the Rutgers win, but I agree with Dirk too, where there were so many flaws in that game that you can't really feel like Nebraska built a ton off that game. I think the defense this year took some strides forward. There's some reason for optimism there. The offensive line, you can kind of see how that's coming together with the true freshmen and redshirt freshmen and Cam Jurgens. But, man, there's a lot of questions at quarterback. There's a lot of questions at really all the skill positions, running back, receiver. You have no idea what that's going to look like next year. And I think beyond that, you have to wonder about some of the play calls that we saw all year, the kind of reluctance to go to Dedrick Mills in seemingly obvious situations, especially against Minnesota. That finally showed up against Rutgers, but where's that been? It's just one of those kind of weird endings to a season where I think you can point to a few good things, but overall, you look at that schedule next year too, and you just kind of wonder in what way can we be optimistic about next season?
Yeah. Yep. What's the biggest question then? So, like, if you come out of this offseason and Tom, I understood your thought process at the beginning of the season that this is sort of like not a training camp, but sort of part one of a 2-part movie. And part one went a little rough at times. So what is the biggest question then? Like, as you look into this offseason, knowing that we're going to do multiple big picture conversations about the football team, we have a long offseason ahead. What at this moment looms as the biggest question for you as it relates to this team doing what fans want them to do, which is win more games?
Well, it's probably Scott Frost. I thought that this season shined a light on Frost, and really, you can look at it as either you can have doubts about what he's doing, or you can. I think it opened up to, okay, what about his staff? The fact that there are still so many mistakes, and the response after every game is, we got to get him cleaned up. That's all he says. And I get it. But I just feel like the coaching staff, the offense, the direction of the offense. I wonder, I loved your idea about going to a run game, but do they have the running backs for that? I don't know. There's so much mystery behind this program. Omar Manning. They have downfield receivers. I mean, do they have the parts to run the Oregon passing game he wants to? I don't know that. I mean, they're building these things, but it's still sort of a clouded mystery right now. But I think it starts with the coaching. I mean, no matter what scheme you run or talent you have, if you're still having all these false starts, 5 false starts a game, or if you can't even snap the ball and get a play going, it doesn't matter. So there's too many mistakes. The execution, and I go back to that Peach Bowl. I know people are tired of that Peach Bowl. I'm tired of the Peach Bowl, but the execution was almost flawless in that game. Well, what happened? Where's the disconnect between the staff we saw at UCF and now? It doesn't make sense.
Fair. What do you
Sam,
think?
I think
Go ahead.
in a lot of ways, programs are more interesting. Struggling programs are more interesting when the perceived strength is the weakness, and that's where Nebraska is right now. That's where Nebraska was in 2013. That's where Nebraska was in 2015. I mean, this is supposed to be an offensive juggernaut, and it's about as far from that as you can reasonably get.
Right.
And I think all the pressure is on Scott Frost this offseason to figure something out offensively, whether it's a staff change, a scheme change, a quarterback change. The identity has to change. Certainly, as Tom pointed out, and you've pointed out in a lot of columns, the execution has to change. I mean, they're so sloppy. You know, we beat this turnover thing into the ground almost every year, and yet, you know, they're going to finish 123rd in turnover margin.
That's
I mean,
right.
Are you kidding me? After all the emphasis they've put on turnovers the last 3 years, and they're going to be 123rd in the country.
Yeah.
It's borderline embarrassing, and I don't know. You know, the common denominator is the coaching staff, and so I think that they've got to figure out a way. Even if you're not prolific offensively, you at least have to be clean offensively, and they just seem like they're a long way away from that. I thought it was interesting the other night. You know, Adrian Martinez, he gave his. First of all, I think it's important to point out he's not nearly as polarizing as Taylor Martinez was. I mean, there's
Not
a lot
as good either.
there's a lot more middle of the road people, you know, sort of the moderates when it comes to Adrian.
Right.
But I thought it was interesting how if you're an Adrian Martinez fan, he gave you what you wanted. You know, he gave you what you needed to suggest that he's the guy going forward.
Right.
And if you're an Adrian Martinez detractor or critic, he gave you what you needed to persuade you that he's not the guy going forward. It's just that also is sort of a microcosm of the whole year.
It is. What's your biggest question, Evan? You're more in the trees like me than these other two guys. What's your biggest question?
I mean, I think the coaching staff is also probably the biggest one, but you know, I'll focus it in a little bit more on the quarterback situation. We've talked about that before, about how Nebraska needs an elite level guy running that offense to flip the switch, and Dirk laid out kind of why Adrian Martinez may or may not be that guy, but 4 turnovers against Rutgers certainly is not what you're looking for there. The completion percentage that he had this year, especially late, is, as you pointed out too, Sam, misleading because of all the short throws. They haven't had any semblance of a vertical passing game. And so I think that's really interesting this offseason. What do you do if you're Nebraska? Do you roll out Adrian Martinez as a 4th-year starter who's been benched and has had chronic turnover problems? Do you turn the reins over to Luke McCaffrey in a critical year 4?
Also a chronic turnover machine.
Yeah, as the guy that he is anointed as kind of that future. Do you go to the transfer portal and find somebody, kind of a mercenary style quarterback, to come in and right the ship a little bit? Do you go to Logan Smothers, who will still be a true freshman next year on eligibility standards? Like, that's a huge question moving forward. Not just who can operate this thing, but whoever they pick is going to set the tone for the team. If they go transfer portal, that's going to have repercussions with guys on the current roster, and so on and so forth. And so the offense has unquestionably been the weakest part of the team. And so if I'm Scott Frost and I'm trying to find a way to fix it, that's where you have to start. Is Martinez that guy? Is he not? I mean, heck, he could end up being a 5-year starter at Nebraska if he were to come back next year and the year after that because of the eligibility freeze. But is that really what you want to move this program forward? Is kind of that good leader and captain and kind of gives you a little bit of something and takes a little bit of something away? Or do you try to take that next step? And I think what they do at that position is going to be really indicative of how they view the importance of next season.
My view of this is I'll zoom even further out and say, is Frost coaching like he has the long runway, or is he coaching with an urgency that indicates that they have to win right away, or that a bowl was going to change something, which it wasn't, even if they won it. There seems to be a sort of a split personality within the framework of, we want to be this kind of offense, but we can't afford to play through the execution errors that come with playing the most talented guys. So most of those guys are going to sit while we play the older guys who can execute the things we want to do. But at the same time, we're going to run these package plays where you can do 3 different things at once, which, by the way, brings the possibility of more turnovers into play, because just like a point guard that could do anything, as opposed to running a set play, you're more likely to turn it over. And then they turn it over, and we don't want that. But simultaneously, you want to continue to run that kind of offense, and you also want to run it at a fast pace, but you also want to be buttoned up. You also want to do all the little things, all the little components that make you like, a Herm Edwards team or a Tony Dungy, let's make sure we're running the football and playing defense kind of team. You have to have a sense of which identity you want to be. And from my perspective, like when you watch Ohio State, at the end of an Ohio State football game, unless they're playing Clemson, Ohio State's usually won the game because they have better football players, and they're just pressing themselves against the opponent more and more and more. Doesn't mean they were better coached, per se. It means that they had better football players. And that's what happened in the Northwestern game. Ohio State crapped a brick for about 2.5 quarters. They stunk. And then they won the game by 12. And the reason they win the game by 12 isn't because Northwestern had lesser schemes. It's because Ohio State has way better players. And over the course of a game and over the course of time, the more you put better players out there and the more opportunities you give those guys, the more chances there are that they're going to be better than the other team. The problem that Nebraska has, obviously, is they don't have Ohio State's players. They don't have as good of players as Ohio State does. And so when they go up against the Northwestern or the Iowa or even the Minnesota, which has a really solid standard formula, PJ Fleck knows how he wants to play. All the goofy off the field stuff is what it is. But when they get in football games, he's Jim freaking Tressel. And Nebraska gets in these games and they're like, we don't really know what's going to happen. It's a roulette wheel spin. And I think the biggest question that they've got is, who do you want to be? Do you want to be this freewheeling, high-octane offense that does turn it over and has a devil-may-care attitude about it, but eventually overcomes those mistakes and beats lesser talented teams? Or do you want to be this sort of buttoned-up, classy Northwestern, Iowa, Wisconsin? And I would submit that it's possible to be both, I suppose. I think Alabama might be that team, but it's really hard. It's really hard to be both of those things at the same time, because a lot of the guys that you have to recruit in order to be the Ohio State are the guys that you got to put on the field even if they're making mistakes, because they're going to do something during the course of the game that buttoned-up guy can't do. Henceforth, Ohio State has beaten Northwestern and Wisconsin, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, the last 4 Big Ten championships. It was Wisconsin, Northwestern, Wisconsin, Northwestern. Every single time the Big Ten West's buttoned-up team went and played Ohio State, they lost. And I believe they lost in every game except one by double digits. And so at the end of the day, who do you want to be? Do you want to be the team that wins the Big Ten championship because you know who they are and you know what they do? Or do you want to be the team that wins 7, 8, 9 games, makes the fan base happy, because believe me, the fans will be thrilled if that comes back, but ultimately doesn't get you where you want to be? And so to me, that's more of the question. And then you've got to coach into that reality and not worry so much about, well, gosh darn, we lost this game, or we didn't do this, or we didn't do this. And I think that's where, I would ask Frost, tell me the plan, and then I'll tell you what the expectations of the media and the fans are going to be. I feel like the story continues to be, well, it's going to be the 90s. Well, they're going to win championships. And I'm like, okay, well, if you're going to win championships, play the young kids. Play them. Play all the young guys, develop them as they come. They're going to make a bunch of mistakes, but in 2 years, they're going to be really good. And I think where Frost kind of gets stuck is between this, I want to play those guys and I want to recruit them, and then, oh, crap, we lost a game. I can't play them anymore. I got to play the guys that I think will help us win 21-17. And then I think it also plays into the bowl decision. If you want your team to be player-led, and I think he does, I think he wants a team that's going to be player-led, then you have to be okay with player-led decisions. And if the players say, hey, we've had enough of this, and they don't agree with that, maybe they have a disagreement with each other. It's okay to disagree. Live with that. The guys will come back in late January. They'll figure it out. Let the players lead. They're not going to learn how to lead if every single time they make a decision that the fan base doesn't like, you're going back in and piloting the ship again. So I think that, to me, is the biggest question. Is like, who do you want to be? And if you want to be Northwestern, I think Nebraska can be Northwestern within a year or two. They can get to 8-4 without much pain. If you want to be Ohio State, that's a long runway, and it's going to take a long climb, and it won't be easy. And on top of that, you got to find the quarterback. You have to find the player who's going to transform your offense, not the guy that fits into it. Northwestern has Peyton Ramsey. He's fine. But you got to find the transformational player, and you've got to keep searching for that guy until you find him. And I'm not sure that Adrian Martinez as a senior is that guy, and we don't know about McCaffrey or Smothers.
Sam, I think the concern that I would have about Frost right now is that Oregon had generally better talent than the teams around them, and UCF had generally better talent than the teams around them. And if Nebraska isn't going to have generally better talent, does Frost have it sort of plays into what you're talking about, but does he and his staff have the ability to sort of maximize and find a different way? It's to oversimplify it. It's easy to win the game of tag on the playground when you're the fastest kid. They're not the fastest kid right now. And so, can they find another strategy to get where they want to go? And I think that's going to take some serious reflection.
To get where do they want to go is the question.
Yeah, but it's similar to what we're talking about. But, and as evidence for that, I would submit we could probably go through this year by year and make a funny column out of it. But how many position groups in 20 years of Nebraska football have had a worse season than Nebraska's receivers did this year? I mean, it's almost –
yeah. No, I get it. Yeah. It's running backs other than Mills. Yeah, no question. It's almost embarrassing that a program that devotes this much energy and resources, scholarship resources, as much of its sort of identity to the offensive skill positions as it does, to have a position group that was you could have put those guys on a milk carton this year and it would have been totally appropriate. They basically just banished the wide receiver position from the offense. Again, it's just like, how does that happen in this day and age of college football where receivers come in more prepared than they've ever been based on all the stuff that they do in high school? How do you just have an entire position group just drop off the map? It just baffles me. Fair. It's great. And again, if they want to be the second iteration of Bill Snyder's K-State with Colin Klein, and you get two good receivers, and Kansas State didn't have six, they had two, and a running back and a quarterback run game, and you play – again, K-State played slow, right? They played slow ball. They held the ball for 40 minutes. They bled the clock. They protected their defense. That's what Northwestern does. That's what Minnesota does. That's what Iowa does. That's what Wisconsin does. That's how they win games. And if you want to be that, I think Nebraska can be that actually quite quickly. It's a question, but the flip side of that coin is believe the evidence on hand. And the evidence on hand says you're not going to play in the college football playoff if you do that, because you're not going to get good enough players in order to make it happen. Now, maybe there's always going to be the one-off. Washington 2017, I suppose. But generally speaking, it's really hard. And it's not a problem if you say, hey, you know what, maybe we're going to have that magical year where all the stars align and we get there and we win the Big Ten championship and we go 10-2 and we go to the Rose Bowl and we win that, and hallelujah. But, the 2006 Nebraska team had a hell of a lot of talent on it. Zach Taylor, Brandon Jackson, Marlon Lucky, good receivers, Adam Carricker, Jay Moore, Stuart Bradley. They went 9-5. I mean, that's the reality of it. The 2009 Nebraska team went 10-4 because of the offense they ran. And so Bo made a decision in 2010 to go to a quarterback that he thought could get him over the top, and he was wrong. But I understand why they did what they did. Now, it opened the turnover portal wide, but those are some of the decisions you have to make. And I think that's where Frost has to be able to say, here's who we want to be, and this is what we want to do, and take it or leave it. And I feel like they've just been a little of a split personality from week to week. That's all.
Yeah. I'm not trying to put you on the spot as someone who follows this thing on a minute-by-minute basis. And Evan, it'd be interesting to get your thoughts too.
Yes.
But the identity and philosophy thing is interesting to me. But to me, there's also something going on where in the player development mode or the practice regimen or something where they're just not, I mean, this is going to sound, overly critical or hyperbolic, but you watch these guys on Saturday afternoon on offense and you wonder if they practiced during the week. Like, you wonder what they did
right
on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And I think Frost needs to take a deeper look at just what they're doing in preparation and player development. It's not even strength and conditioning. It's just like it's just practice habits seemingly, where they don't seem to be, doing things cleanly on Saturday. And over we hear this thing where, they practice well all week, and I'm not just talking about the Minnesota game. I mean, we've heard this for 3 years. We practiced well this week. We thought we were ready. We had a great plan. And then we were awful offensively. Like, what is going on? Why is there such a disconnect?
Yeah, it's an interesting thought. And it feels like there's been kind of almost a process of elimination thing as we've gone on. Like, year one, it was, culture and holdover players and guys aren't buying in. Well, that's pretty much gone because these are almost entirely Frost guys at this point. Well, it's strength and conditioning. These guys didn't do, squats. They didn't do this and that. Well, 2 years later, their lines are holding up, generally speaking, with the Big Ten. You can see the gains that they've made there. But, yeah, I mean, I almost every week that Frost says they had a good practice, we tweet something like that out. And the reaction on Twitter, man, is just like, here we go again. Another one of those weeks fans kind of have come to roll their eyes, I think, at those kind of statements. The more I've been thinking about kind of Tom's question about where was this UCF staff here? Like, what's been the biggest difference? And I think something that continues to stick with me is kind of the downside of coaching at your alma mater. I mean, we've talked about all the benefits of Frost coming back. He knows the state. He knows the traditions. But he takes the losses very deeply. I mean, he feels what the state feels when Nebraska loses. And so it feels like, to me, in some ways, Nebraska missed an opportunity to develop some younger players this year in a pandemic throwaway year that in some ways is kind of a hall pass, as we've said, because he doesn't want to lose games at Nebraska. He feels that pain too deeply. And so I feel like that's where some of the disconnect has come in. And you think about some of the ways Nebraska's lost games in the second half, the way things have slipped away, and you just kind of wonder, would he have coached the same way at UCF if this was an AAC game in October with 10,000 people in the stands? Does he play it differently, or does he approach things differently than with the spotlight here at Nebraska in the Big Ten? So I wonder if that's not something too that maybe he'll have to continue to adjust to and kind of recalibrate as he moves on.
Yeah, there's a lot. I echo what Evan's saying. There's a lot of moving parts. It's obviously a more complex job at this level, and the coaching, the guys you're coaching against are better. And by that, I don't necessarily mean the head coaches. People tend to focus on the head coaches too much. The caliber of staffs that you're facing are just better. I mean, Iowa and Northwestern have defensive coordinators who've been defensive coordinators for 8 years and have been defensive coaches in major leagues for 35. That's not true at Tulane. It's just not. And, it's just not the case. So the quality of coach that you're facing in the Big Ten from an assistant level is higher. I think the offense that Nebraska runs is reactive to defenses. And so many of the plays are triple options. They're triple option. They're not the triple option we recall, but they're triple options in the sense that they can either, give, keep, throw, swing. Sometimes there's probably 4 options on a play. And I think having a quarterback who can kind of process all that within 2 or 3 seconds is important. And I think Martinez can, but that's part of it. And, at the end of the day, I think they get into games and they've lost a lot of games very closely. And usually that means one of 2 things. Either A, you have to adjust the way that you play stylistically, so that the inches that you need or the yards that you need, especially in special teams, are in your favor. Or, like Frost says, they're actually close. And once they get all their players up to speed on offense, those 4-point losses and 7-point losses will turn into 17 and 21-point wins, because they will go into halftime up 31-14 as opposed to trailing 17-14. So that kind of is the issue. And he can continue to ride that out. I believe him on his face when he says he believes that they're close. I have no reason to doubt that. I just felt like I saw from week to week these sort of fluctuations in approach and quarterback play and game plan that indicate to me that they're still what they're trying to do is win games. And it's like trying to achieve, an outcome and then fit the process to the outcome. And I think you have to probably figure out exactly what you want to do on that side of the ball, and then work toward perfecting that, and then you'll get better outcomes. And so I thought this year they were going to lean way more on the running backs, and they didn't do that. I don't know what the final tally was, but the quarterback carries were north of 50%, which is a lot. And so, I think you're going to have to chew on that and look into it, and maybe ask yourself, do we have the best running backs we need to have? Do you have the best running backs in the Big Ten? That kind of stuff. So, yeah, to me, it's all about that offense. And then on special teams, they got to find a guy that can kick a stinking touchback. And you need to hire whomever you need to hire to get that, because that was the issue. Their punting wasn't great, but the guy that they recruited got hurt. He'll be back and he'll be good. The kickoffs, you need to find a guy that can kick the stinking thing into the bleachers. End of story. I mean, seriously. And you know what? Caleb Lightbourne could. Of all the things the guy couldn't do, the thing he could do is kick the crap out of the ball in a kickoff. They haven't been able to find that, and it's frustrating. It's a frustrating deal, because that you don't necessarily. There's times when you want to get cute and execute stuff and try to pin somebody in their own end with a sky right or whatever. But when you face Aaron Cruikshank, what you really want to do is kick the ball into the bleachers. And they don't have a player who can do it. So as a result, Rutgers started drives at the 36, 44, 50, and then had a kickoff return for a touchdown. That is ridiculous. So they have to find somebody who can simply do that. And if they do nothing else, they can do that. And it's surprising to me that they didn't find that in the offseason, but they obviously did. And thus it goes silent.
Okay. Tom, what do you think?
Well, I think everything you guys have said is right on, and I don't have much to add, but I will. It feels like a pivotal point for Frost. Early, it's only been 3 years, but he has seen the league now. If there was a shock factor or he was surprised by something, he knows what he's got. every one of these Big Ten teams, they have an identity. They know who they are. They recruit to it. They're the same thing every year. They should be easy to scout, right? So the problem is you've got to be better than them on Saturday. And I get the feeling Nebraska. It's like you said. What do they want to be? Who do they want to be? What style? He needs to find that right now. And I don't think you're going to make a living in the Big Ten trying to beat Wisconsin or Iowa at their own game. I like the idea of being different. But the problem is you've got to be just a little bit like Iowa, Wisconsin, in that you don't turn it over, you don't have a lot of penalties. You got to be clean and you got to be efficient, but still play as fast as you want. It's a little bit of a balancing act there, but they don't. I still don't see the parts on the field. If you're going to be a running game or a passing game, I don't see the parts either way. I just feel like they have a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and so if they're coming up, great. I really like the angle of he's shown that he can find running quarterbacks. That's not a bad angle because those guys drive people crazy in the Big Ten. They drive people crazy everywhere. But you have to have the running quarterback has to have a partner, a really good running back like Mills, who could take advantage of. We got to take one or the other. Maybe you could bring back a fullback. Make everybody happy. I just think that's a good angle, but you've got to pick it. You've got to pick a strength. You got to find something that you do well, and it has to be sort of a bread and butter or something that you can lean on when times are tough. But I think he still likes the idea of the Chip Kelly passing game, and that's not bad. But you've got to get the receivers, and you've got to get a receivers coach, and you've got to get them out there. The horizontal passing game, the swing passes, I don't like that at all. It doesn't, even when it's blocked well, doesn't seem to get a lot of yards.
It's built into the offense. That's the thing. That could be a run, it could be a pass. It's whatever Martinez decides it is. It's like an outlet play. Instead of having an audible, they do that.
It's the first play of the game, and
I know.
It's
to read.
Get him out there on the edge, the quarterback, and let him, throw to the tight end or run. And I just feel like it's also asking a running quarterback to throw a bunch. You can't have a quarterback who's a roller coaster. And I just feel like the identity is a big decision. There's some personnel decisions that, like, Luke McCaffrey, I think could probably be a good quarterback. I think he's a dynamic guy, running the ball, catching, put him on special teams. He may not want to do that, and he may decide I'll go somewhere else if I don't get to play quarterback. But these are tough decisions the coach has to make. Should you bring in a grad transfer quarterback next year to get this offense jump-started? Great question. That's a tough call because it could cause trouble. But
what kind of quarterback you bringing in? A thrower?
Somebody who's going to be consistent every week. Yeah, somebody who's going to be accurate every week. If you're going to throw the ball, but if you want to run it, and you can devise this running quarterback scheme, you got to have the running backs to go with it. But McCaffrey could probably do that and probably do it very well. But he wants to throw too, and it's just, I don't know.
Let me ask you guys, if we could get the defensive staffs at Northwestern, Iowa, Wisconsin, and Minnesota together, we take them out to Johnson Lake and hold a 4th of July retreat on a fishing boat where everybody's drinking and smoking cigars. What do you think? I know what they're saying about Nebraska's offense. I know they're, probably chuckling about Frost's comment from 3 years ago, and this idea that Nebraska can out talent people, and whatever. But my question is, if you could get them all together, what do you think they don't want? Which of those directions do you think they don't want Nebraska to go? Which direction do you think is a bigger threat to them? Do you think they'd rather see Nebraska conform and try to do what everybody else is doing at a higher level with better athletes? Or do you think that, they'd prefer to Nebraska to see, Frost continue to implement, UCF North and try to do it with pace and in a manner that is much more his track record than potentially what might work in the league? Which do you think is a bigger threat to those defensive coordinators and those those schools? That, because I'm listening to this conversation and it's interesting, but it's also, I'm sure it's something that has happened Kirk Ferentz has been at Iowa for 20 years, and Pat, Fitzgerald has been at Northwestern for 15 years, and those guys have certainly thought about all this stuff, and they're probably kind of laughing at Scott Frost, thinking that he can do something that nobody else is doing. So my question is, what do you think they want to see Nebraska do?
What do you think, Evan?
Say what they would want Nebraska to do is to keep doing what it's doing, to keep throwing those horizontal passes, to keep running that quarterback, because the odds are, over the course of time, if you run at the rate Nebraska does, those guys get hurt. I think you want them. I'm sure PJ Fleck from the Minnesota game was okay with not seeing a lot of Dedrick Mills out there. The Rutgers game at the end, I think a lot of people said, where was this all year? Where was pounding Mills 25 times? Yeah, okay, he was nicked up some, but if not him, then Marvin Scott or somebody else pound the ball within that running scheme. I mean, you think of Wisconsin 2019, Nebraska moved the ball on the ground very well against that Wisconsin defense. It feels like when they commit to running within their scheme, they have a lot of success. And so I guess if I were a Big Ten defensive coordinator out there, I'd just be kind of snickering to myself about, okay, let them force all these swing passes and short throws, and let them leave Luke McCaffrey on the sidelines, and let them hand off to Mills 10 times a game. Like that to me is what I'd be real happy with, because just the way that it sets up, the way that scheme allows runners to flourish. I mean, we've seen it a lot. They did it at UCF a lot. People think of the big passes and the long plays, but it's all set up by the run. And if Nebraska is not going to commit to that, then what you're left with is this kind of potpourri offense, this sort of muddled attack that has no real feel to it. So I would say, yeah, let them keep doing what they're doing if I were a D coordinator.
I would say conform. They would rather Nebraska conformed. And I think part of it is that if you go back to the end of the 2018 football season, I think most defensive coordinators were like, they're coming. This isn't going to be easy. When you look at the way Nebraska was playing that season. And what has happened since, I think, is they've lost some of the best. They've lost the two best players they had on that offense in Morgan and Ezigbo, and they haven't replaced them. And but I think most defensive coordinators would say, if they ever got the guys and they ever got the right quarterback and they ever got the receivers and the running backs, that offense is really good and we don't want to face it. But the challenge is they haven't been able to recruit and or develop those players. So, I think Frost would tell you that what you saw against Rutgers was his offense. And that's what we want to do. And I think that's fine to say that. I think, and he would say, well, this is what the defense showed us. They were playing man. We were able to do some things that we didn't think we'd be able to do, and then we did them, and then these runs broke open. Like, I think he would process it out that way. But I suppose the challenge of it is again, I think if you want to play the offense they want to play, they're going to have to put the guys out on the field who can actually do it and who can actually beat people deep. And, even though Wyatt Lever was held on that one play, and he was held, the interception that Martinez threw in the end zone, nobody was open. Nobody was open. The guys don't, you've got 85 and 88 running routes back there. They're not getting open deep, and they didn't get open deep. And so Martinez should have thrown it out of the end zone, yeah. But he's trying to do something. He's trying to make a play, trying to do something before half. He's got an aggressive mindset, and so he makes a bad throw, and he made a mistake. On that skinny poster out to Wan'Dale Robinson, not a good throw. Not a good throw. And Robinson was probably open. And Martinez struggles to put balls between defenders. Boy, it'd be nice if that were a 6'3" receiver and not a 5'9" receiver. And I'm sure Frost thinks that too. God dang, we got to get that guy. We got to get somebody who can actually go make that play, and so that if our quarterback overthrows it by a foot, we got a guy that can go up and get it. And so I think that's part of the piece, But I think you got to play the guys too. I don't know what the situation was entirely with Omar Manning, but so that would be my answer to that question, Dirk. Is that I think they would. I agree with what Evan's saying. I would say that much like a defense kind of looks at 4th and 7 and says, "You're going for this," but they don't want you to go for 4th and 7. They want you to punt. Because anytime you go for 4th and 7, there's a chance you might get it. And for years and years and years, offenses wouldn't do that, and they'd punt it at their own 45. But now they're kind of going for it, and they're getting it about half the time. And that scares defensive coordinators. And I think Nebraska's offense can scare defensive coordinators. It's just that it has to be better than it's been, and you have to have a quarterback who doesn't turn it over as often as Martinez has, or McCaffrey for that matter.
Right. The quarterback is
you should use that, Sam. That's actually a very good example of what we're talking about. It's Nebraska continuing to try to go bold, I guess, when all the evidence is sort of pointing them in the alternate direction. Sorry to interrupt, Tom. Go ahead.
Oh no, just it's just the wrong sport we're talking about here. But a long time ago, Dana Altman, when he was at Creighton, told me that he said, I said, well, when you got here, you weren't a coach who pressed full court. You didn't shoot all these outside shots. You were more in line of the old sort of Oklahoma State, K-State walk it up and get a good shot guy. Why did you change? And he said, if you're at the bottom of the league, you can't do what everybody else is doing. You can't be vanilla. You have to be. You have to throw them a curveball. You have to throw them something off speed that they aren't used to, and they have to prepare for, and they don't like. And so that's what I did, and I think that might be the case here. I like the idea of Nebraska being different in the Big Ten. It might help bring players here. They see the same old other places, and yes, the same old is going to bowl games and it's winning games. But I like the idea of Nebraska being different, but they've got to be enough like the other schools to execute the plays and not make mistakes. That has to stop, no matter what scheme they're running. But I like the idea of them being different. But being different also means you can have a running quarterback and have this. Scott is a very intelligent guy who's been around a lot of football. I mean, this is a chance for him to maybe come up with something that I'm not saying nobody else is doing, because there really aren't too many original ideas in coaching. Everybody borrows from something. This is a chance for him to maybe take what he was going to do and maybe do a little bit different. So, but take what you have as a strength and use it. And they have running quarterbacks, so use that as a strength somehow. So, I think that's what I would do.
Here's where I agree with Evan, is that I feel like what is happening in games is defenses are able, they can see what Nebraska's offense is, and they're able to manipulate a situation where Nebraska is throwing a sideways pass. And I think that's less than ideal. Like, I think that's where I would agree with Evan in the sense that it would be good if Nebraska comes out at the start of a game and establishes an identity and says, look, you know what? To start the game, we're gonna run it down your throat. We're getting in the pistol and we're taking Dedrick Mills and we're putting him up your hat. And what happens a lot of the time is we're going to come out and what you show us, we're going to react to, and we're going to go where you're not. And I think the defenses at times have been able to manipulate Nebraska into the sideways throw. And in that piece, we saw it against Purdue in 2019. We saw it against Minnesota a little bit. We saw it in that Illinois game. The first play of the game, you're taking away what McCaffrey wants to do on that backside zone, and he's trying to do something goofy down the line. And I think those pieces could be cleaned up a little bit to where you're saying, let's create a little bit more of an identity around our running back and a little less around, let's play motion offense and, let the defense dictate what how we're gonna go where they're not and that kind of thing. I think you could probably push the percentages a little bit there so that the first play of the game isn't a sideways pass to Austin Allen, which against Rutgers it was. It's a little 4-yard pass, and we're all kind of sitting there at the press box. We're like, well, they're going to run the ball. Nope, it's going to be a pass to Allen. And you're like, that's the read. I get it. I get it that that's the read. But you would hope that at some point, Nebraska's like, we're just going to start with a downhill run, and we're not going to start with a read play that they can manipulate into a pass to Hickman or Allen or whatever, if that makes sense.
How much more, Sam? I need to go pretty soon.
You can go. We're going to talk hoops.
I'll talk a little hoops. Go ahead.
All right. Well, let's move on to basketball. Merry Christmas to Nebraska basketball. They're going to play at 5 p.m. on Christmas.
What the hell is the Big Ten Network doing?
Well, it's the Big Ten. They wanted the inventory on Christmas, and they're comparing it to the NBA. Did you grow up watching the NBA on Christmas? I did not, but I understand that in the last 20 years, 15 years, that's become quite a tradition. But it didn't used to be on Christmas until the last 15 years or so.
First of all, I just shouted that in my house, and my elementary age kids are probably wondering what's wrong with me. But I just how can you make an argument for student athlete welfare and all this garbage that they argue over the years, and then we're gonna load the Big Ten Network schedule on Christmas Day with college basketball in an empty arena. Like, what the?
Yeah. I think they feel like this will give the kids something to do on Christmas. That's what Hoiberg said. This is a way for them. So the way that he's presenting it to them is, hey, you know what? You guys grew up watching the NBA on Christmas. And I think a lot of people have done that in recent years. So this is an opportunity for you to be on. And, Michigan State and Wisconsin, if I'm a college basketball fan and I've already opened my presents, I'd watch that on Christmas Day. I'd watch that over the NBA, which is truly meaningless on Christmas Day. I don't know that Nebraska-Michigan moves that needle, and I feel bad for Michigan. I mean, they got to travel. I think it stinks for Michigan. Yeah. I don't know how much it stinks for Nebraska, but it certainly stinks for Michigan. By 5 o'clock on Christmas Day, you are ready to do something.
No, I hear you. I just
– you know what I mean? I'm ready.
Talk about identity crisis, Dirk. The Big Ten has the biggest identity crisis around. They want to be the Ivy League.
Yep.
And, the student welfare and the academics and the libraries, and then here comes the Big Ten Network on Christmas Day.
Yep.
They love money, and the Big Ten is like a smaller version of the NCAA, where they talk a good game, but when it comes down to it, they love money. So just be like the SEC. Here's who we are, and you can like us or not, but this is what we're doing. So,
yep.
I might actually be at that game. So
good. Let's have you there.
I'm on Christmas Day by 2:00. Nobody even knows I'm alive.
Right.
So I might be gone. I might just go down to Lincoln.
I think I've left for multiple bowl trips on the evening of Christmas because my wife is like, Molly's like, all right, see ya.
One of my favorite Lee Barfnick stories is an Orange Bowl story on Christmas Day, where he's walking into the hotel ballroom, and there's Tom Osborne all by himself watching game film in this ballroom on Christmas Day. Like, ho, ho, ho.
I had to watch it. Anyway, so the basketball team, they lost to Wisconsin, played really hard for a long time, and then they got felled in by the same run that beat them against Creighton and Georgia Tech. Any thoughts?
Well, can I
have a lot. So
let me ask you guys I casually follow it. I know that the Big Ten's a bear. Like, convince me, like, to what's the case to continue to invest in this team like this year? I mean, like, seriously, the schedule.
Your question.
Like, what's the case
to
to
play really hard? They play Doc Sadler hard defense, and they're going to beat Michigan on Christmas Day. How's that?
Whoa!
Oh,
that's what I think they're going to do.
Well, Evan, you don't have to buy tickets, at least. I mean, you're not investing in that.
I think they're going to do that. I think they're going to beat Michigan.
Whatever.
Yeah. It needs to be entertaining for you and to invest and have and they need to compete and this is like the football this year. It's a setup year, but they need to be resilient and tough because they're going to take a lot of losses and a lot of hard knocks, and they need to stay together. I really do like this nucleus. I like them a little better when they get another big guy. They got to make their shots. This is like football all over again. Defense, but no offense. They get the offensive genius coach. Where's the offense? Hit your shots. Execute. So when this team hits their shots, like the first half against Creighton, it's still a lot of fun. I think the investment value for a fan is, okay, this is a better upgrade from last year. How do they do against the Big Ten's best? Let's sit back and watch. And we don't expect a lot, but by the end of the year, we may have something to hang our head on. That's Nebraska in 2020.
Guys, I watched that game last night, like many of you, and the whole time I'm thinking, Wisconsin has scored 3 points in 11 minutes. The fact that Nebraska is not ahead by 17 points right now is a big problem.
Yeah.
And of course, the Wisconsin run eventually came, and I think, coaches look back at that first 10 minutes and probably said that's where we lost the game. We should have built up a huge lead. But the issue that I have with this team is the idea that they are going to start making shots. Like, we talked about this 2 weeks ago, and I don't feel any differently today. Nebraska is shooting 31% from three-point range. They're 211th in the country. And the idea that they have good shooters who are just in a slump couldn't be more wrong, in my opinion. Like, I don't care what they're doing in practice. When the ball leaves their hand, those do not look like good shooters. And so you are not instantly going to turn into a 35% three-point shooting team in the Big Ten Conference. You're going to get worse, not better. And I just think that if they are seriously counting on Nebraska to start making shots, they're going to go 1-19. Like, they have to find another way. And defense is one of those ways. I've been pleasantly surprised how good they are defensively. But man, this idea that Nebraska is a good shooting team that's just not making shots, I think is a joke.
Hoiberg's pretty calculated. I appreciate it. So I think a lot of part of what he says, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I think part of what he says to us is a message to his team.
Right.
And so I think what he's mirroring to us is, I believe in my players. They're good guys. They're going to make their shots, and that's what's going to happen. I think there does come a point where it'll become clear to him that they're not going to make that he has to assume they're not going to make their shots, and they'll make some necessary adjustments. Shamil Stevenson last night, for example, played 1 minute. He came in. He may have airballed his three. I can't remember. It was a bad shot. And then he didn't take another one, and then they just took him out. Like, they knew that yeah, this isn't going to be a night where we're going to be able to use him. He's not going to get going. So they sat him down. But yeah, I think they'll make adjustments if they need to, and they probably will. I think the team isn't quite as quick as last year in terms of its offensive quickness. They've got, Cam Mack, Gervais Green, and Deshaun Burke had lots of weaknesses, but getting into the lane wasn't one of them. I mean, they could do that. They were very quick. Honestly, Nebraska only has maybe Trey McGowan's, who can beat really anybody off the dribble. Teddy doesn't beat people off the dribble. He kind of shoots over them, but he does that well. And Delano can if he's in transition, but when he's in that sort of, half-court setting, he doesn't do a ton of that. The other thing is I think defenses know that Nebraska is not going to take a shot between 17 and I don't know, 8 feet. They just won't take them. They're going to take threes, and they're going to take shots at the rim, and they really don't do a lot of in-between, short corner. They just don't do that very much. And so, I think defenses know that. They play hard at the rim as a result. They play out at the three. Latman's got to make shots. He isn't making any. Thor isn't making any shots. I think they're both under 28% from three-point range, which is rough. And that's kind of, it's the long and short of it. That said, I think they're going to beat Michigan. Michigan's been off for 12 days. They haven't played a game in a long time. They're going to be rusty. They'll be rested, but they'll be rusty. They beat Penn State by 4. They're one of their best player is Isaiah Livers, but their second best player might be it's probably Wagner, but their third best player is probably a big center who I don't think has faced a Doc Sadler post defense yet. And I think his name's Hutchinson, and he's averaging 17 and 9, and he's probably going to have a hard night. He's probably going to turn it over 3 or 4 times, and he's probably going to struggle. And I think Michigan will have to figure that out, and I think Nebraska will hit enough shots, and they're going to pull off an upset. And I think that'll propel them a little bit. That'll get them going. Maybe I'm way off. Maybe they'll lose by 17. But I think they can take Michigan. And I think if they do that, then maybe there's a kind of, okay, we're willing to, maybe not quite in for a penny, in for a pound, but we'll give this 2 or 3 more weeks and see if they can show us something. But I do think the Michigan's the game they can win. I don't think they're going to win at Ohio State, and I do not think they will beat Michigan State. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I think Izzo is going to coach the hell out of those games.
That's the thing. In a rebuilding season, and we've seen this with Nebraska basketball recently a lot, you got to find a way to win a game every 3 weeks.
Yeah.
You have to do it. They didn't do it last year. They went on these huge, collapses in the last few years of Tim Miles. I mean, when you're trying to keep a team together and keep a season going, you have to find a way to win a game every 20 days. And this is, I think you're right, Sam. This is the opportunity. The concern that I have is, in the old days, you might have a 14,000 people show up at Pinnacle Bank Arena when you're 4-12 in the Big Ten, and you get a win out of it because the home crowd kind of ignites you. They don't have that energy boost anymore. So they got to find another way to do it. Maybe they finally make shots, but I think the lack of crowd probably hurts Nebraska this year because they could count on that to lift them up a couple times during the conference season.
Well, I think that's about all the time we've got. It's going to be a busy 2 or 3 weeks, guys. So we'll have plenty to talk about. There's going to be guys that leave the program because they're seniors and they want to go. There's going to be guys that transfer out because they're not going to play. There's going to be guys that Nebraska will look at portal. You always have to assume there'll be coaching attrition. Why? Not because anybody's a bad human being, but because Nebraska has had coaching attrition every single year since, I think, 2012. And then you never know. There might be some other action out there. So there's a lot going on. It's going to be a busy 2 or 3 weeks. So whoever's able to show up and talk about it, great. But for everyone else, say happy holidays, Merry Christmas, hug your families. It's been a long year. Let's hope 2021 is better.
Thank you.
Thank you, vaccine. Take care.